Captain Jake Morrison sat in the command chair of the UES Venture, watching the endless stars drift past the main viewport. The small exploration ship had been traveling through deep space for 3 weeks now, mapping new solar systems and collecting data for Earth's growing star charts. Morrison's crew of 12 had settled into the routine of long-range exploration, taking shifts to monitor the ship's systems while they pushed further into uncharted territory. The mission was supposed to be simple and safe. They were exploring a region of space that long-range sensors had marked as empty, with no signs of intelligent life or dangerous phenomena. Morrison had commanded similar missions before, and they usually involved months of peaceful travel punctuated by the occasional interesting discovery of a new planet or unusual stellar formation. Morrison was reviewing the day's sensor reports when his communications officer, Lieutenant Tony Martinez, looked up from his console with a frown. "Captain, I'm picking up some strange readings on the long-range scanners," Martinez said, his voice carrying a note of concern that made Morrison pay attention. "What kind of readings?" Morrison asked, setting down his datapad and moving to look over Martinez's shoulder at the display. The screen showed several blips, moving at high speed toward their position, but they didn't match any known human ship signatures. "Unknown contacts, sir. They're big and they're moving fast." "One count at least 6 vessels, possibly more," Martinez replied, his fingers dancing across the controls as he tried to get a clearer picture of what was approaching them. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. The Venture was alone out here, days away from the nearest human outpost. If these were hostile ships, his small exploration vessel would be completely outmatched. "Are they responding to our hails?" he asked. "Negative, sir." "No response on any frequency," Martinez said, shaking his head. Morrison moved back to his command chair and activated the ship's intercom system. "All hands, this is the captain. We have unknown vessels approaching our position. All crew to battle stations. This is not a drill." The ship's alarm system began to sound, and Morrison could hear his crew moving quickly to their assigned positions. The Venture's weapons were minimal, designed more for dealing with space debris than actual combat. They had a few defensive systems and some basic energy weapons, but nothing that could stand up to a serious military engagement. Morrison had always hoped he would never need to find out how inadequate his ship's defenses really were. "Captain, the contacts are dropping out of faster-than-light travel," reported his tactical officer, Sergeant Lisa Kim. "They're taken up? Attack formations around us." Morrison watched the main screen as 6 sleek alien vessels materialized around his ship. They were unlike anything he had ever seen, with smooth curves and aggressive angles that suggested they were built for war. The ships were much larger than the Venture, and they moved with a predatory grace that made Morrison's stomach tighten with fear. "Try to establish communications again," Morrison ordered, though he suspected it was probably too late for diplomacy. The alien ships had arranged themselves in a perfect attack formation, with the Venture trapped in the center like prey surrounded by hunters. Before Martinez could send another message, energy beams lanced out from the alien vessels and struck the Venture's shields. The ship shuddered under the impact, and sparks flew from several control panels as the defensive systems overloaded almost immediately. "Shields are down to 30%, Kim reported, her voice tight with stress. "We can't take much more of this." Morrison gripped the arms of his command chair as another volley of alien weapons fire struck his ship. The lights flickered and he could hear the sound of hull plating being torn away. "Return fire," he ordered, knowing it was probably useless. But unwilling to surrender without a fight, the Venture's small weapon systems fired back at the alien ships, but their energy beams seemed to have no effect on the attackers' shields. The aliens were toying with them, Morrison realized. They could have destroyed the human ship instantly if they had wanted to. "Hull breach on deck 3, shouted his engineering officer, Chief Petty Officer Dan Wright. "We're losing atmosphere." Morrison activated the emergency communications system. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Venture. We are under attack by unknown alien vessels. Our position is..." He managed to transmit their coordinates before another energy blast struck the communications array and cut off the signal. The alien ship suddenly stopped firing, and Morrison watched in horror as boarding pods launched from the nearest vessel. The small craft moved with purpose toward the Venture's hull, and Morrison knew that his crew's fate was sealed. "Prepare for boarding action," Morrison announced over the intercom. "All hands arm yourselves and prepare to repel boarders." The boarding pods attached to the Venture's hull with loud metallic thuds that echoed through the ship. Morrison could hear cutting tools working to breach the hull, and he knew they had only minutes before the aliens would be inside. Morrison's crew took up defensive positions throughout the ship, armed with the few weapons they carried for planetary exploration. They were explorers and scientists, not soldiers, and Morrison knew they stood little chance against what was coming through their hull. The first breaches came simultaneously on 3 different decks. Morrison watched his tactical display as red indicators showed alien intruders moving through his ship with deadly efficiency. The sounds of weapons fire and screaming echoed through the corridors as his crew tried desperately to defend themselves. The aliens moved through the ship like a plague, overwhelming each defensive position with superior numbers and technology. Morrison listened to the reports coming in over his headset, each one worse than the last. His people were being cut down one by one, and there was nothing he could do to save them. "Captain, they're heading for the bridge." Wright's voice crackled over the communicator before it went dead. Morrison drew his sidearm and prepared to make his last stand. The bridge doors exploded inward, and tall figures in dark armor poured into the command center. Morrison got a brief glimpse of his attackers before a stunning weapon struck him and everything went black. When Morrison woke up, he was alone on his ship. The bridge was empty except for bodies, and he could see that the alien boarding party had withdrawn. Through the viewport he watched as the alien vessels prepared to leave. But one of them remained nearby. A transport beam enveloped Morrison, and he felt his body dissolving into energy. The last thing he saw was his dead crew, scattered around the bridge of the Venture before he was pulled into the darkness of alien captivity. Morrison woke up in a white cell that hurt his eyes to look at. The walls seemed to glow with their own light, and there were no shadows anywhere. He lay on a hard metal surface that might have been a bed, though it was too narrow and uncomfortable for any human to rest properly. His head pounded with pain, and when he tried to move, he discovered that his wrists and ankles were held down by some kind of energy restraints that buzzed when he struggled against them. The cell was completely empty except for the metal platform he lay on. There was no door that he could see, no windows, no furniture, nothing that gave him any clue about where he was or what his captors wanted with him. The air smelled strange, like ozone and something else he couldn't identify. It was too warm, and the humidity made his clothes stick to his skin. Morrison tried to remember what had happened to him. He recalled the attack on his ship, the boarding party, watching his crew die one by one. The memory made his chest tight with grief and anger. Tony Martinez had been working the communications console when the aliens broke through. Lisa Kim had been trying to coordinate their pathetic defense. Don Wright had been reporting damage from engineering when his voice cut off mid-sentence. They were all dead, and Morrison was alone. A section of the white wall suddenly became transparent, and Morrison found himself staring at one of his captors. The alien was tall, maybe 7 feet, with grayish skin that looked like it was made of overlapping plates. Its eyes were large and black, with no visible pupils, and its face was angular in a way that suggested it had evolved from some kind of predator. When it spoke, Morrison heard the words in perfect English, though he could see that the creature's mouth movements didn't match the sounds. "I am War Leader Vexter of the Kethver Empire," the alien said, its voice carrying a metallic quality that made Morrison's teeth ache. "You are the first of your species that we have encountered. We require information about your world and your people." Morrison said nothing. He had been trained for this possibility, though he had never expected to face alien interrogators. The principles were the same regardless of who was asking the questions. Name, rank, and serial number, nothing else. Your silence will not protect you, Vexter continued. We have methods of extracting information that your primitive species cannot resist. It would be better for you to cooperate now before we are forced to use more unpleasant techniques. Captain Jake Morrison, United Earth Space Force, serial number 2847 Alpha 9, Morrison said, keeping his voice steady. He would give them nothing else. The alien's head tilted slightly, and Morrison got the impression that it was studying him like a specimen. Your world is called Earth. We detected your transmissions before we found your ship. Tell us about your military capabilities. How many ships do you have? What weapons do you possess? How large is your population? Morrison repeated his name, rank, and serial number. He had been enhanced with military-grade neural implants that would help him resist interrogation, but he didn't know how effective they would be against alien technology. The implants were supposed to create mental barriers that would protect classified information, but they had never been tested against non-human methods. Vexter made a sound that might have been a sigh. Very well. We will do this the difficult way. The alien gestured to someone Morrison couldn't see, and the wall became opaque again. The energy restraints released Morrison suddenly, and he sat up on the metal platform. Before he could fully orient himself, the floor beneath him began to tilt and shift. He found himself sliding down into a deeper part of the cell, and the walls began to close in around him. The space grew smaller and smaller until he was forced to curl up in a ball, his knees pressed against his chest. The pressure continued to increase, and Morrison felt like he was being squeezed by a giant fist. His ribs ached, and it became harder to breathe. The walls pressed against him from all sides, and he could feel panic starting to build in his chest. But he gritted his teeth and endured it, focusing on his breathing and repeating his name, rank, and serial number in his mind. After what felt like hours, the pressure stopped, and the cell returned to its original size. Morrison lay gasping on the metal platform, his body covered in sweat and trembling from the ordeal. But when the wall became transparent again and Vexler appeared, Morrison was ready. Captain Jake Morrison, United Earth Space Force, serial number 2847 Alpha 9. He said before the alien could speak. This pattern continued for days. The aliens would try different methods of physical torture, each one more creative and painful than the last. They froze him until his teeth chattered and his fingers turned blue. They heated the cell until he felt like he was being cooked alive. They played sounds that made his ears bleed and his vision blur. They filled the air with chemicals that made him sick and dizzy, but Morrison endured it all, and never said anything beyond his name, rank, and serial number. The neural implants helped, creating a kind of mental wall that protected his memories and thoughts. But more than that, Morrison was driven by the knowledge that his silence was protecting Earth. If he told them about humanity's true capabilities, his entire species might be doomed. After a week of physical torture, the aliens changed their approach. They brought in a new interrogator, a creature that called itself Mindripper Zolthek. This alien was different from Vexler, with pale blue skin and tentacles where a human would have fingers. When it touched Morrison's forehead, he felt something cold and alien probing at his thoughts. The mental invasion was worse than any physical pain. Morrison felt the alien presence crawling through his mind like a parasite, trying to find his memories and drag them into the light. He concentrated on his mental defenses, using techniques he had learned in training to compartmentalize his thoughts and hide his most important secrets. Zolthek worked on him for hours, and Morrison felt his mental barriers starting to crack. Under the assault, the alien pulled up random memories from his childhood, his training, his first command. Morrison watched helplessly as his private thoughts were displayed on screens around the cell. But the deepest secrets remained hidden, protected by layers of conditioning and technology that the aliens couldn't penetrate. Interesting, Zolthek said after the session ended. Your species has more mental discipline than we expected. But everyone breaks eventually, human. We have all the time in the universe. Morrison lay on the metal platform, his mind feeling raw and violated. But he was still intact, still keeping his secrets. Captain Jake Morrison, United Earth Space Force, serial number 2847 Alpha 9. he whispered, and began to count the days until someone would come looking for him. Admiral Lisa Hayes stood in the command center of Luna Station, staring at the star map that showed the last known position of the UES Venture. The exploration ship had been missing for 2 weeks now, and there had been no word from Captain Morrison or his crew. Hayes had authorized search missions before, but this one felt different. The Venture had disappeared in a region of space that should have been completely empty. Still no response to our long-range communications? Hayes asked Commander Ben Clark, who had been leading the search efforts from his ship, the UES Pathfinder. Nothing, Admiral, Clark replied over the secure channel. We've been broadcasting on all frequencies for the past week. If the Venture is out there and still functional, they would have heard us by now. Hayes nodded grimly. She had served with Jake Morrison for over 10 years, and she knew he would never maintain radio silence unless something terrible had happened. Morrison was too professional and too careful to simply disappear without sending some kind of distress. Signal. The search had started 3 days after the Venture missed its scheduled check-in. Hayes had initially assumed it was just a communications problem or perhaps some kind of equipment failure that would be resolved quickly. But as the hours turned into days, she had begun to fear the worst. Continue following their last known. Heading, Hayes ordered. I want every system in that region scanned. Check for debris, energy signatures, anything that might tell us what happened to them. Clark's voice crackled through the speakers. Understood, Admiral. We're currently 2 days out from their last reported position. If there's anything to find, we'll find it. Hayes ended the transmission and turned to face Dr. Amy Foster, the lead scientist for the Seoul Defense Force's Xenorchaeology Division. Foster was a small woman with sharp eyes and graying hair who had spent her career studying the possibility of alien life. Until now, it had been purely theoretical work. Doctor, I need you to prepare your team for the possibility that we might find evidence of non-human technology, Hayes said. I know it sounds crazy, but the Venture was in empty space. If something happened to them out there, it might not have been natural causes. Foster nodded slowly. I've been thinking the same thing, Admiral. The odds of a catastrophic system failure that would destroy the entire ship without leaving any trace are extremely low. And there's nothing in that region that could pose a natural threat to a starship. Hayes had been hoping that Foster would tell her she was being paranoid, but the scientist's agreement only confirmed her worst fears. What would you need to analyze alien technology if we find it? I'd need samples, preferably intact pieces of equipment or weapons, Foster replied. My team has theoretical knowledge about xenorchaeology, but we've never had actual alien artifacts to study. We'll do our best, but it would be completely new territory for us. Hayes looked back at the star map, where a red dot marked the Venture's last known position. Somewhere out there, Jake Morrison and his crew had encountered something that had either destroyed them or taken them. Either way, Hayes was determined to find out what had happened. The next day brought the news that Hayes had been dreading. Clark's voice came through the communication system with a tone of barely controlled emotion. Admiral, we've found wreckage. It's definitely from the Venture. Hayes felt her heart sink. What's the status of the crew? No survivors, ma'am. The ship was torn apart by what looks like energy weapons. The hull plating shows scorch marks and penetration patterns that don't match any human technology I've ever seen. Hayes closed her eyes for a moment, thinking about Morrison and his crew. They had been good people, explorers and scientists who had volunteered to push the boundaries of human knowledge. Now they were dead, killed by something that humanity had never encountered before. Collect all the debris you can find, Hayes ordered. I want every piece of wreckage analyzed. And Clark, scan the area for any other ships or energy signatures. Whatever did this might still be in the area. Already on it, Admiral. We're detecting some unusual quantum signatures in the surrounding space. It looks like multiple ships were here, and they use some kind of faster-than-light drive that's different from our own. Hayes turned to Foster, who had been listening to the conversation with growing excitement despite the tragedy of the situation. Doctor, it looks like you're going to get your chance to study alien technology, Foster nodded. I'll have my team ready to analyze whatever Commander Clark brings back. This could be the most important discovery in human history. Over the next several hours, the Pathfinder collected debris from the destroyed exploration ship. The wreckage told a story of overwhelming force and superior technology. The Venture's hull had been sliced open by weapons that could cut through military-grade armor like paper. The ship's defensive systems had been completely overwhelmed, suggesting that the attackers had vastly superior firepower. But it was what Clark found in the ship's computer core that changed everything. The automated systems had continued recording even as the ship was being destroyed, and the data showed energy signatures from at least 6 unknown vessels. The computers had also detected boarding pods and evidence that someone had been taken from the ship alive. "Admiral, I think Captain Morrison might still be alive," Clark reported. The ship's internal sensors show that one person was transported off the vessel just before the attackers left. The energy signature suggests some kind of matter-to-energy conversion beam. Hayes felt a spark of hope. If Morrison was alive then, there might be a chance to rescue him. But it also meant that humanity's first contact with alien life had been an act of war. "Can you track where they took him?" "We're working on it. The quantum signatures are fading, but our computers are analyzing the data. It's going to take time, but I think we can trace their path." Hayes made a decision that would change the course of human history. "Commander, I want you to follow that trail. Find out where they took Captain Morrison and report back immediately. And Clark, this information is now classified at the highest levels. No one outside of this operation is to know about the alien contact until we understand what we're dealing with." "Understood, Admiral. What about the families of the Venture crew?" Hayes paused, thinking about the difficult conversations she would have to have with the families of 12 good people. Tell them their loved ones died in the service of humanity. That's the truth, even if we can't tell them the whole truth yet. As the Pathfinder disappeared into hyperspace, following the trail of Morrison's captors, Hayes prepared to brief the Global Defense Council about humanity's first contact with hostile alien life. The universe had just become a much more dangerous place. President Robert Kim sat at the head of the emergency council table, his face grave as he listened to Admiral Hayes present the evidence of alien contact. The holographic display showed images of the Venture's wreckage, energy signatures from unknown ships, and computer reconstructions of the attack. Around the table, the most powerful people in the solar system absorbed the reality that humanity was no longer alone in the universe. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are facing the greatest crisis in human history," Kim said once Hayes had finished her briefing. "An alien empire has attacked one of our ships, killed our people, and taken one of our officers prisoner. We must assume that they will return in greater force." General Frank Miller, the Supreme Commander of Earth's military forces, leaned forward in his chair. "Mr. President, I recommend that we activate the Prometheus Protocol immediately. If these aliens are as advanced as our analysis suggests, we're going to need every ship and weapon we have." The Prometheus Protocol was humanity's most closely guarded secret. For 30 years, hidden bases throughout the solar system had been constructing a massive fleet of warships designed to defend Earth against unknown threats. The project had consumed enormous resources and required the cooperation of every nation on Earth, but it had been built in absolute secrecy. "Are we certain the fleet is ready?" Kim asked. "The last report I received said we were still 6 months away from full operational capability." Miller nodded. "The ships are ready, sir. We've been conducting training exercises in the outer system for the past year. Our crews are prepared, and our weapon systems have been tested. The only thing we've never faced is actual alien technology." Dr. Amy Foster, who had been analyzing the debris from the Venture, spoke up from her seat at the far end of the table. "Based on what we've learned from the wreckage, the alien weapons are powerful but not impossible to defend against. Their energy signatures suggest they use plasma-based weapons, which our new shield systems should be able to handle." Hayes added, "Commander Clark has been following the quantum trail left by the alien ships. We've located their base of operations in a star system about 40 light-years from Earth. It appears to be a heavily fortified world with significant military infrastructure. Kim turned to his science advisor, Dr. Susan Wright, who had been quiet throughout the briefing. Doctor, what's your assessment of our chances in a direct confrontation? Wright consulted her datapad before answering. The alien ships appear to be individually superior to our vessels in terms of technology. However, our intelligence suggests they weren't expecting organized resistance. The attack on the Venture was conducted by a small force, probably a scouting mission. They may have underestimated our capabilities. Miller stood up and activated a new holographic display that showed the hidden fleet. The Prometheus fleet consists of 237 ships, including the dreadnought UES Retribution. We have 50,000 trained personnel and enough firepower to level a planet. More importantly, we have something these aliens don't expect, the element of surprise. The display showed sleek warships hidden in asteroid bases throughout the solar system. The vessels were larger and more heavily armed than anything humanity had ever built before. The centerpiece was the Retribution, a massive ship that dwarfed even the largest civilian vessels. Its hull bristled with weapons, and its armor was designed to withstand direct hits from nuclear weapons. The plan is simple, Miller continued. We jump the entire fleet to the alien system simultaneously. Hit them hard and fast before they can organize a defense. Our primary objectives are to rescue Captain Morrison and demonstrate that humanity will not tolerate attacks on our people. Kim looked around the table at the faces of his advisors. What about the risk of escalation? If we attack their homeworld, won't that just provoke them into launching a full-scale invasion of Earth? Hayes answered, Mr. President, they've already committed an act of war by attacking our ship. We can either respond with overwhelming force now, or wait for them to return with a larger fleet. I believe our only chance is to strike first. And strike hard? Dr. Foster nodded in agreement. My analysis of their technology suggests they're used to dealing with primitive opponents. Their tactics during the attack on the Venture were sloppy by military standards. They may not be prepared for a coordinated assault by a technologically advanced force. Kim made the decision that would determine humanity's future. General Miller, you have authorization to activate the Prometheus Protocol. I want the fleet ready to move within 72 hours. Miller saluted sharply. Yes, sir, I'll begin recall procedures immediately. As the meeting broke up, Miller immediately began the process of activating humanity's secret weapon. Throughout the solar system, coded messages were sent to hidden bases and covert facilities. In asteroid belts and behind planetary moons, massive hangar doors opened to reveal the ships that would carry humanity's response to the stars, the UES. Retribution was the first ship to power up its systems. The massive dreadnought had been built in a hollow asteroid beyond Neptune's orbit, where it had waited for 30 years for this moment. Captain Helen Ross, the ship's commander, watched as her crew of 5,000 prepared for humanity's first interstellar war. All stations report ready for departure, Ross announced over the ship's intercom. This is what we've trained for, people. We're going to bring one of our own home and show the galaxy that humanity doesn't back down from a fight. Across the solar system, similar scenes played out on dozens of other ships. The cruiser used Thunderbolt launched from a base hidden in the asteroid belt. The destroyer UE's Lightning powered up its weapons. Systems in a crater on the far side of the moon, fighter squadrons, prepared to launch from carriers that had been disguised as mining stations. Dr. Wright worked frantically to develop countermeasures against alien technology. Her team had analyzed every piece of data from the Venture's destruction, and they had created new shield configurations and weapon modifications that might give humanity an edge in battle. A key is their plasma weapons, Wright explained to Miller during a final briefing. They use a focused energy beam that can cut through most materials, but our new deflector arrays should be able to disperse the energy and reduce their effectiveness. Miller nodded as he studied the tactical displays. What about their shields? Their defensive systems appear to be designed to stop energy weapons. Our kinetic projectiles should be able to penetrate their defenses more easily than energy beams. As the 72-hour deadline approached, the largest military force in human history prepared to leave the solar system. The Prometheus fleet would carry humanity's message to the stars: attack one of us and you attack all of us. The galaxy was about to learn that humans would fight for their own, no matter the cost. The Prometheus fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kethmer system like an avenging storm. 237 human warships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming in the light of the alien star. General Miller stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, watching as his tactical displays filled with information about the enemy system. "All ships report successful jump completion," announced Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Davis from her position at the communications console. "The fleet is holding position at the designated coordinates." Miller nodded as he studied the tactical situation. The alien homeworld of Kethmer Prime hung before them like a gray jewel, surrounded by dozens of orbital defense platforms and patrol ships. The planet's surface was covered with massive cities and military installations that stretched across entire continents. "Enemy fleet composition?" Miller asked his tactical officer, Commander Steve Walsh. "We're counting approximately 80 ships in the immediate area, sir. Mix of patrol vessels, cruisers, and what appear to be heavy battleships. They're moving to intercept us, but they seem confused by our sudden appearance." Miller smiled grimly. The element of surprise was working exactly as planned. The Kethver had not expected humanity to possess faster-than-light travel, much less a fleet capable of striking at their homeworld. Their defensive formations were designed to repel attacks from primitive species, not a coordinated assault by advanced warships. "Signal from the enemy flagship, General," Davis reported. "They're demanding our surrender and asking how we achieved faster-than-light travel." "Tell them we're here for Captain Morrison," Miller replied. "They have 60 seconds to release him, or we'll take him by force." The alien response came quickly. War Leader Vexler S. image appeared on the main screen, his black eyes filled with rage and confusion. "Impossible! Your species lacks the technology for interstellar travel. How did you find us?" Miller stepped forward so the alien could see him clearly. "We followed the trail you left when you murdered our people and kidnapped our officer. Return Captain Morrison immediately or face the consequences." Vexler S. laugh was a harsh sound that made the bridge crew wince. "You dare threaten the Kethver Empire with your handful of primitive ships? We have conquered 100 worlds. Your pathetic fleet will be destroyed in minutes." "We'll see about that," Miller said, and cut the transmission. He turned to his weapons officer. "All ships, prepare for combat. Target their orbital platforms first, then move to engage their fleet." The battle began with a devastating barrage from the human fleet. The UES Retribution's main guns opened fire first, sending streams of kinetic projectiles racing toward the alien defense platforms. The tungsten slugs, accelerated to significant fractions of light speed, struck the alien shields with enormous force. The Kethver defensive systems, designed to stop energy weapons, proved inadequate against the solid projectiles. The first orbital platform exploded in a brilliant flash of light as its power core overloaded. 3 more platforms followed within seconds, their wreckage raining down on the planet below. "Direct hits on targets 1 through 4, Walsh reported. "Enemy shields are ineffective against our kinetic weapons." The alien fleet finally began to respond, but their formation was chaotic and uncoordinated. They had never faced an enemy that could match their technology, and their tactics were built around overwhelming primitive opponents with superior firepower. Against a coordinated fleet of advanced warships, their usual strategies were useless. The human ships moved through space like a pack of wolves, each vessel supporting the others in a complex dance of war. The destroyers provided cover for the larger ships while the cruisers engaged the enemy at long range. Fighter squadrons launched from the carriers and swarmed around the alien vessels like angry hornets. Captain Helen Ross commanded the Retribution with calm precision, directing her ship's massive firepower against the largest alien vessels. "Target that battleship," she ordered her weapons crew. "Full spread, all forward guns." The Dreadnought's weapon systems unleashed hell on the alien flagship. Dozens of kinetic projectiles struck the enemy ship's hull, tearing through armor plating and destroying internal systems. The alien vessel tried to return fire, but its plasma weapons were absorbed by the Retribution's deflector screens throughout. The battle, Colonel Pete Johnson's Special Forces teams prepared for their most important mission. Their job was to locate and rescue Morrison while the fleet kept the enemy fleet busy. Johnson had volunteered for the mission personally, knowing that the success of the entire operation depended on bringing Morrison home alive. "Drop pods ready for launch," Johnson announced over the tactical channel. "We'll go in during the main assault and extract the prisoner." The Special Forces drop pods launched from the UES Thunder, racing toward the planet's surface under cover of the fleet's bombardment. Johnson and his team of 20 elite soldiers had trained for this kind of mission for years, but they had never expected to conduct a rescue operation on an alien world. The pods punched through the planet's atmosphere and landed near what appeared to be a major military complex. Johnson's team moved quickly through the alien facility, using their advanced sensors to search for human life signs. The complex was mostly empty, with the alien defenders focused on the space battle raging overhead. They found Morrison in a white cell deep underground, exactly where their intelligence had suggested he would be. The captain was thin and battered, but alive and alert. When Johnson's team broke down the cell door, Morrison looked up with eyes that still burned with defiance. "Captain Jake Morrison, United Earth Space Force, serial number 2847 Alpha 9, Morrison said automatically, not recognizing his rescuers at first. "Captain, this is Colonel Johnson, Earth Special Forces," Johnson said, removing his helmet so Morrison could see his face. "We're here to take you home." Morrison's eyes widened with recognition and relief. "How many ships did you bring, Colonel?" "All of them, sir. The entire Prometheus fleet." Above them, the space battle was reaching its conclusion. The alien fleet had been decimated by the human assault, with only a handful of ships remaining operational. The orbital defenses were completely destroyed, and debris from wrecked alien vessels littered the space around the planet. War Leader Vexter S flagship was crippled and drifting, its engines destroyed and its weapons offline. Miller opened a communication channel to the defeated alien commander. "This is General Miller of the United Earth Forces," he announced. "Your fleet is destroyed, your defenses are gone, and we have recovered our officer. The Kethver Empire has learned what happens when you attack humanity." Vexter appeared on screen one final time, his proud bearing replaced by defeat and fear. "This is impossible. How did a primitive species develop such powerful weapons?" Miller smiled coldly. "We're not as primitive as you thought. Consider this a lesson in human determination. You took one of ours, so we took your world. Remember this day, and remember that humanity will never surrender." As the rescue teams returned to the fleet with Morrison safely aboard, Miller gave the order for the human ships to withdraw. The message had been delivered with overwhelming force. The galaxy would know that humanity was not to be underestimated, and that attacking human ships would bring swift and terrible retribution.